everybody, this is Peter with BibleMoneyMatters.com, and today we're talking about houses, real estate, and how much of a house you can afford when you're looking to buy a house. Why don't we just jump right into it and talk about what do the experts, financial experts, say when it comes to how much you should pay for your house and how much you can afford. Dave Ramsey, he says you should have 100% down. That's the best ideal way to buy a house, he says, is to pay cash up front 100%, and then you don't have to worry about how much of your monthly income your mortgage payments are. Now, he realizes that that's not realistic in every situation, and he says that otherwise, if you can't put 100% down, you should at least put 10 or 20% down on the house and get into nothing more than a 15-year fixed mortgage that's 25% or less than your your take-home pay. So again, that's going to cut it down for a lot of people as far as what they can get into. David Bach, he says that you should get into a mortgage no more than 29% to 41% of your gross income on housing costs. And that's going to include your mortgage, your property taxes, insurance. And he says the only way you should get up to 41% is if you have no other debts at all. Bach also gives kind of a cautionary note saying that he thinks that to come to a number, you should really come to your total number and then knock 10 to 20% off of that mortgage payment that you come to and use that as your top end. Thomas Stanley, who wrote the Millionaire Next Door, studying millionaires here in the United States, said based on his studies of millionaires, he figures that if you want to be building wealth, you shouldn't be getting into a mortgage that's any more than 2 times your annual income. So if you're making $100,000, a mortgage of that's net income, you shouldn't be getting into a mortgage any larger than $200,000 after your down payment. Suze Orman, she says, figure out what you're paying for rent and then add 45% on top of that mortgage payment, or excuse me, that rent payment. If you can save that extra 45% on top of your rent payment every month for 45 months or longer, only then should you even consider getting into home ownership. What do banks say that you can afford? Banks have what they call debt-to-income ratio, and they have one on the front end and on the back end. Front end debt-to-income ratio is going to be around 28% of your gross income. So basically, they don't want you to be having a mortgage payment any more than 28% of your take-home pay. So basically, to figure that out, you're going to take the potential cost of your monthly mortgage payments, taxes, and insurance, and divide it by your monthly income. On the back end, they don't want you to have a debt-to-income ratio of any more than 36%. And beyond including your mortgage payments, taxes, and insurance, you're also going to be including all your other debt obligations, and then divide that by your monthly income to come to a number. Another thing to remember when you're thinking about how much you can afford for a house is don't forget all the hidden costs of home ownership. Not only are you going to be paying for a mortgage, your taxes, and insurance, there are other costs that can come in there as well, like private mortgage insurance if you're not able to put down at least 20%, association costs if you're in a neighborhood that has one, lawn care, utilities, maintenance, costs for commuting if you move further away from work, and there's a whole host of other costs that you're going to have to take into account. Home ownership is much more expensive than renting because you're having all those added costs piled on top of your payment. So something to take into account. If you want to build wealth, my tip of the day is just to buy less than you can afford. Figure out how much you can afford, and then buy something a little bit less than that. Thomas Stanley, when he was studying millionaires, he found that most millionaires when they bought their first house, they were buying much less than they could afford. They were buying something that was 1.5 times to 2 times their annual income, and usually not much more than that. So they're buying something they can readily afford, and they're taking all their extra money, they're investing it, saving it, and giving it to others. That way they're not getting into a house that's over their head, and they're not becoming house poor. So definitely something to take into account when you're figuring out how much you can afford. Figure out what you can afford, and then think about maybe downsizing just a little bit off of that number in order to give yourself more breathing room. I'd love to hear your comments on YouTube, on BibleMoneyMatters.com as well, telling me what you think people should do as far as a house payment, how much they should afford and how much they should put down on their house when they're buying a house. So leave a comment, and thanks for watching.